It's Halloween season. That means it's time to start talking about scary movies. So today I'm gonna give you my 10 picks for my favorite horror movies of all time. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your picks for your favorite horror movies of all time. Since we're talking favorites, not best, there's no reason to get like mean, nasty in the comment section. Let's have a nice, fun discussion about this genre that we all love. Also, as we go into this, I'm discussing the movies that I think of when I think of horror movies. So some stuff like Jaws, Terminator, Silence of the Lambs that technically could be considered horror, those aren't movies that I included in this list because those aren't the movies that come to my mind when I think horror films. One final thing before we get started, this video is brought to you by my supporters over on Patreon. Each month I have them submit ideas for a video and then vote on which idea they like the best. This is the video they picked for October. Great idea for a video. I don't know why I didn't just have this one on my schedule anyway. On Patreon, I do a weekly live Q&A video. At a certain level, you can get your name on the end card, and I even have a fantasy football league with my patrons where I'm doing horribly this season. If you might be interested, you can find the link below in the description to check it out to see if it's right for you. With that said, let's get started. Kicking things off is Frailty. This is a small psychological thriller from about 20 years ago. It was directed by Bill Paxton, who also stars in it. It's about a father who believes that God has sent him out to find people who are actually demons in disguise and bring him to his home and kill them. And he has his sons help him in this process. So as you're watching it, you don't know if the dad is crazy or if he's actually doing the work of God, and you're seeing it from the perspective of these two sons who have very different reactions to what's happening, and so it kind of really messes with your head. I actually watched this with my wife during our first year of marriage, and I didn't know which things kind of freaked her out, and let's just say it did not go well for us. Matthew McConaughey's all in it. Also, Powers Booth is in it. It's a small film. It's just very much kind of warps with your mind a little bit. Love the concept. Very effective. It's what it's going for. So it makes it into my top 10. At number 9 is Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. The Friday the 13th movies were kind of the horror films that introduced me to the slasher genre. After my mom would go to bed, I'd stay up late watching scary movies she otherwise wouldn't let me watch. Late night on cable television, I watched almost all of the first 8 films, all out of order and in different pieces and at different times. And the one that I enjoy the most out of that batch is Part 6. I think this is the one that gets the tone right. Some of the earlier films were a little bit too self-serious for the plot that they had and kind of what was going on. This one doesn't treat it like a joke. It doesn't go over the top with the humor, but it is self-aware. It knows there's an inherent silliness in what they're doing with the Jason character, and it embraces the silliness. So you get the scares, you get this horror, but you get a little bit of subtle humor inside of it at the exact same time. Along those same lines, this is the movie that fully embraced the whole zombie Jason thing. I mean, that idea had always kind of been there. This one just goes full steam ahead. He's a zombie that comes back from the dead. You get Tommy coming back in this one with that kind of abandoning the weird ideas they went with in Part 5. All in all, a movie that has all the things that I like from this franchise that I grew up watching. Next up is The Conjuring. Typically, I'm not the biggest fan of the demon possession, exorcism subgenre of horror, but I think James Wan crafted a film that is just of a higher pedigree of most films inside of this space. I mean, even if you just look at the basic plot of the film on paper, it looks like it's going to be just like a bunch of other films, but James Wan finds a way to make a better film. First ingredient inside of that is I think he has better characters. Ed and Lorraine Warren make for just such an interesting couple that feels so normal while doing such fantastical things. But even the other actors, the other characters feel more fleshed out than most characters like this in films like this. The second thing that he does great is that he does wonderful world building. You feel like you're going back to the 70s from the soundtrack, the color scheme, the production design. It feels like we're in a different space, and it works really nicely. The third thing, he's got great practical effects inside it of people being whipped around. He's not going all CGI with everything. He does it in camera, and it makes for a movie that has great scares, great performances, and just sucks you in from beginning to end. Coming in at number 7 is It. This is a movie that once again works on a whole bunch of different levels. You've got a bunch of main characters that you can relate to. You've got a villain that's terrifying, yet also kind of charismatic and amusing. And then you have an atmosphere that's terrifying. When it comes to the boys, this movie just captures the awkwardness of tween male bonding so well in the way they interact with each other, the way that they make fun of each other. You buy into all of it and relate to them as characters. Second, Pennywise is just like this terrifying creature because they designed him to be dangerous from the very opening of the movie. You see him commit horrible acts against a child right after he was being kind of quirky and amusing right before that. That just makes for a very unsettling balance right out of the gate, and that continues from the beginning of the movie till the end of the movie. And the third thing here is just the city itself feels like a place where something is wrong. Obviously, the stuff with Pennywise is messed up, but then you have a bully that actually pulls out a knife and starts carving letters into someone, and he's getting away with stuff like that because the city itself is broken because of everything going on with Pennywise and everything. Put it all together and you get a movie that's great as a coming-of-age story. It also has the scares, and it also can be really funny at times, so it works on almost every level. Number 6 is Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. No disrespect for George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. I love that one too, but I find myself rewatching this one a little bit more, and this is a favorites list, not a best list, so Zack Snyder is the one that I decided to include. And what I love about Zack Snyder's version of this film is that he takes the themes and ideas and plot of the original film and kind of just gives it a 21st century rock and roll take with a big budget, modern special effects, and modern sensibilities, and it just works really nicely. It's entertaining, it's scary at times, it keeps the tension building, you care about the characters. There's some really nice actors kind of woven into the mix, like Ty Burrell, pre-Modern Family, is in this film and a very different type of character from who he plays on Modern Family. You got Ving Rhames in the mix. All of it making for a movie where you care about these characters, the journey that they're on, their effort to both survive at a mall and escape from the mall and to potentially go off to an island somewhere. You buy into all of it. The action is shot wonderfully. Of all the things you can criticize Zack Snyder for, certainly not his visual style, and you see it right out of the gate in his first film. Another thing people forget about is that James Gunn wrote the script for this movie. So you've got the visuals of Zack Snyder with a script from James Gunn, put it all together. Wildly entertaining. Real quick before I give you my top 5, I got some honorable mentions for you. First up is The Faculty. Now, I might be a little bit biased on this one as I'm a big fan of 1990s Robert Rodriguez. It was shot here in Austin, and the guy that I go to the gym and work out with was actually in this movie as an extra. There's actually a close-up of him in one sequence in it, and he's actually in the trailer in this shot right here. But all in all, I enjoy these Kevin Williamson-style horror movies from the late 90s. We'll talk about that more later in this list. Next up is Get Out. Jordan Peele's directorial debut has horror. It's got a Twilight Zone vibe. It has a little bit of comedy inside of it. It's got some social commentary. It works on just a whole bunch of different levels. Then we gotta have a little bit of Chucky in the mix, so we'll go with both Bride of Chucky and the original Child's Play. If you like the later stuff with Ronnie Yu came in, changed the tone wildly, I had a blast with that one, but the classic original one, I enjoyed kind of the mystery with the child and what exactly is going on. Worked really nicely for me. And then finally we have Cabin in the Woods, a movie that kind of took the whole horror genre, the whole classic Cabin in the Woods trope, and just turned it on its head and went totally bonkers with it in a movie that is a ton of fun and has a young Chris Hemsworth in it. Bringing us into the top 5 is You're Next. This is a movie I kind of went to on a whim back when it came out in theaters about 8 years ago. and instantly just fell in love with it. It's kind of a home invasion style plotline about a family meeting together in a mansion, and then slowly they start being killed off, and there's a mystery as to what exactly is going on, and our lead kind of female protagonist inside of it tries to fight back against the invaders. The basic premise of the film isn't particularly complex, but it's very efficient and effective at what it's trying to do. Whether it's the scares, the kills, having characters that pop out a little bit, that's what this movie does so well. It's the type of film that after I saw it, I wanted to introduce other people to it and talk about it as much as possible because I just thought it was so well done. At number 4 is Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn. For me, this is the Evil Dead film that best mixes the horror with the Sam Raimi-isms. The original Evil Dead plays it fairly straight in how it plays out. It still has a little bit of that Raimi bent to it, a little subtle humor that comes out just because of the way he is and the fact that it's low budget, but mostly it's just a nasty, gnarly cabin in the woods films. And then you have Army of Darkness, where he goes full blown with the comedy, the one-liners, the superhero-esque nature of Ash getting a robot hand and stuff like that. And this movie blends those two things so well. You have the cabin in the woods horror film, you have the possession, you have the gore and the nastiness, and you also have him fully embracing the fact that he enjoys Three Stooges-esque comedy, and it blends so well into something that's so distinctly Sam Raimi. No one else can pull off this type of tone with a film that is a horror movie that can be very gross at times and at the same time have overt slapstick humor. Of course, one of the reasons it works is because Bruce Campbell is made to play this type of character, and he can deliver the one-liners, be the hero, be campy, and run around afraid while doing slapstick humor all at the same time. Put it all together and you get a movie that's groovy. Real quick, before I give you my top 3, be sure to share your favorites down below in the comment section. Also, after this video is done, I've ranked a whole bunch of the franchises that I've talked about in this video, so I've tried to put in cards on the section where I talked about those franchises. There's also this playlist right up here that'll take you to all of my big horror franchise rankings. If you've enjoyed this video, there's definitely something up there that you'll enjoy. In third place is A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is just such a great concept for a horror franchise. Right off the bat, it provides an opportunity for some fantastic creative kills inside of it. Second one, there's something very scary about not being safe when you go to bed. That when you go into your sleep, suddenly you're entirely vulnerable to your nightmares actually killing you. Along those same lines, you can only stay awake for so long, which adds in some interesting dynamics of when are they awake, when are they asleep inside of the film. And then Wes Craven is just such a masterful director that understands the psychology of people, that just the way some of this plays out ties into our primal fears. You have this sequence where Nancy's in bed and then Freddy starts like coming out over her head. And that touches on this fear that most of us had as a child when we're laying in bed and we start to hear noises and you wonder, is there something under my bed? Is there someone breaking into the house? In here, the fear, the nightmare is real. That's some powerful stuff. Add into the mix, of course, Freddy Krueger is one of the classic, iconic villains, and he's fully formed here by Robert Englund. He has the humor. He has this irreverent sense towards violence where he just chops off his fingers and rips his face off just flippantly for no reason, just to scare people. All of that works so nicely to make them this oddly charismatic villain while being a terrifying killer. All of this making for, of course, one of the most famous horror films and franchises of all time. Our runner-up is Halloween. This is a classic of the genre and kind of for a totally opposite reason than why Nightmare on Elm Street is a classic. That one has this very inventive, creative premise. Halloween has a premise that's fairly familiar for the genre, but that's what John Carpenter is so good at. Excellence with simplicity, building tension from the very beginning of the film where you follow this camera as it goes in and murders this teenage girl, and you have this ultimate reveal that the killer was a child himself. And then you go through the day of a group of teenagers years later from their perspective as they know something's not quite right and they're observing just something's a bit off about the day. All of it just kind of slowly building the tension as the movie goes along. And then their perspective is at times contrasted with the perspective of Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, who just kind of adds a pedigree to the film, takes it to that next level. And then you have the reveal of the shape as you go throughout the film. These three perspectives collide in the conclusion, just making for a big payoff. Once again, it's a film that's all about the execution. It's all about the little details and how the movie is put together. The details work, the characters work, therefore the movie works, and it is a classic of the genre. But coming in first place is Human Centipede 2 Full Sequence. A bunch of us saw the first Human Centipede and thought, I wish we got a full sequence. And then Tom Six graciously gave us the full sequence. Just kidding, I still haven't seen any Human Centipede films and don't plan on it ever. But really, coming in at number 1 is Scream. Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson's 90s take on the slasher genre is one part dark comedy, one part commentary on the genre itself, all while still being true to the slasher genre itself. This is a masterclass in how to balance tone, as it's a movie that can make you laugh in one scene while making commentaries and jokes about the film itself that you're watching, and then in the next scene, it can scare you. And the reason this works is because they crafted interesting characters that know that they're in a horror movie. So as they're going through the film, they're calling out the tropes of the genre that they're participating in. Therefore, the humor comes organically from the situations and the characters rather than big joke setups. Likewise, you actually like the characters, so you care about them when they're being killed. Another great touch here is the whodunit mystery of the killer woven throughout the story. Most films in this genre, the killer is fairly set, you know who it is, and you're just waiting for their next kill. Here, there's this mystery of you don't know which of your main characters are actually the killer that keeps you more invested in the story, leading to this nice Scooby-Doo reveal in the end of each of the films. All cards on the table, the Scream movies and all the Kevin Williamson scripted horror films were the horror movies of my high school years. They're the ones that made me love the genre. They're the ones I have the most nostalgia for, and Scream is the king of them all. So it comes in at number 1. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, the link is down below in the description. If you want more horror rankings just like this one, check out that playlist right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.